Hi YouTube, it's Kathy and this is my April 2019 reading wrap-up. If you're not already aware, I do weekly entertainment wrap-ups of everything I read, watch, and listen to, but today we're just talking about the books. During April, I hosted a read-along for In Other Lands by Sarah Reese Brennan. This was part of my birthday week, so I did a birthday vlog as well as a live show with Melanie from Meltotheany just to celebrate this book and the fact that I got older. If you haven't already seen those, I will link them down below. I'm going to start with the nerdy, hardcore stats and charts and then get into what I read. In April, I read 24 books for a total of 6,772 pages. That takes into account converting audiobook minutes to pages, so 2,407 of those pages were actually about 72 hours of audio. The age breakdown for these books was 15 adult books, 7 YA books, and 2 middle grade books. I read 19 novels, 4 graphic novels, and 1 short story. This month I read a lot of fantasy and contemporary with some non-fiction, mystery thriller, historical fiction, sci-fi, and horror thrown in. If you adjust by page count, you can tell which genre was the short story. Most of these books, no surprise, came from the library, but I also got a book from a friend, read something I already owned, read a Life's Library book, and bought one specific title for a readathon. I read 10 paperbacks, 7 audiobooks, 6 hardcover books, and 1 ebook. Most of my books were in the 300 and 399 page range, and the vast majority were published in the last decade. Most of these books were by female authors, and half of the protagonists were female. In terms of setting, most of these reads took place in the United States or other worlds, but I also had some reads from the UK, Germany, Syria, and Canada. In terms of diversity, nearly half of my reads had none to speak of, but I did have reads that were feminist, translated, queer, about race, disability, mental health, or a combination of at least 2 intersectionalities. In terms of star ratings this month, I had 4 3-star books, 4 3.5-star books, 10 4-star books, 2 4.5-star books, and 4 5-star books. Let's start with our lowest rated and work our way up to the highest, shall we? Now the thing about reading an entire series in 1 month is you're going to have different star ratings, and then when you try to start at the bottom and go up, the volumes don't exactly go that way, so I'm going to talk about all of the graphic novels I read this month right now, even though not all of them were 3-star reads. But 2 of them definitely were. The 4 graphic novels I read this month were the I Hate Fairyland volumes 1 through 4. I liked 1 and 2 significantly more than I liked 3 and 4. 3 and 4 are 3 stars for me, and 1 and 2 are 4 stars for me. This series is about a little girl who gets sucked into fairyland and has to go on a quest to find a key to get out of it, and she's really bad at questing, so she's actually been there for 23 years, but her body hasn't gotten any older. So you have this great juxtaposition between this cute little girl who swears like a sailor and murders everything in sight. Like I said, I really adored the first 2 volumes, but I did not really enjoy how this series ended. My next 3-star read was I'll Be Gone in the Dark by Michelle McNamara. This is a true crime book that was published after the author died, and it chronicles the crimes of the Golden State Killer. This is a person who was committing crimes in California in the late 80s and I believe early 90s, if I'm remembering correctly, and was rather prolific in that he raped at least 50 people and killed at least 10. At the time of the author's death, they had not caught the killer. Shortly thereafter, they thought they had caught the killer, but from my understanding, that person has not been convicted. I haven't exactly done the deep dive into this. This book wasn't finished when Michelle died, so a lot of the sections of it were cobbled together from her notes by other people, who I felt did a pretty decent job, but with a case of this size, it's hard to put it all into one book and make it feel cohesive. That is obviously not the fault of the original writer or the writers that helped put it together. It's just such a large scope of a case that it was hard to feel like this was a cohesive book. My other 3-star read this month was The Book of Speculation. This one is a very bookish book as the main character is a librarian, and then it also has a circus element. Simon, our protagonist, lives in a small town. His house is right on the water and is basically one storm away from falling into the ocean. He inherited it from his dad, who didn't take very good care of it, and he raised his little sister because both of his parents died young, but she's since gone off to join the circus. This isn't as weird as it seems because his mom was in the circus, his grandma was in the circus, and through the course of this book he comes to realize that all of them drowned. One day a mysterious book shows up on his doorstep and it unlocks the history of his family, and we get to see his family through the ages. What I liked about this one is the title was perfectly fitting because there were things that were happening in the book that could have been fantastical elements, but that also just seems like some speculation. Moving on to my 3.5-star reads, the first one being The Healthy Mind Toolkit. This is a self-help book for people that just get in their way. It's mainly talking about different ways that people self-sabotage and strategies to not do that. A lot of this book didn't apply to me, so I didn't read every single page of this book. I did end up doing some skimming, and I didn't actually do all of the exercises that you're supposed to do. It wants you to write down things as you're going along, and I didn't. Not to say that you shouldn't if you use this book, but I personally feel weird about writing things down like that because I grew up on Harriet the Spy. My next 3.5-star read was The Case of the Missing Moonstone. This is the first in a series in which Ada Lovelace and Mary Wollstonecraft are detectives, and they're like 11 years old and 14 years old respectively. And it's pretty cute, it's pretty feminist. Obviously this never actually happened, but I happened to meet the author at a local event and he told me about the series and I figured I had to give it a try. I love that he uses this series to teach feminism to middle grade classes. That's fantastic. And I did like this opening book, but not enough to continue the series at this time. My next 3.5-star read was a sequel, and that is The Magician King. This is the second in the Magician series by Lev Grossman. Obviously, being a sequel, I can't really tell you too much about it. What I can say is that the first book is touted as a kid goes to college that is very much like Hogwarts, but there's swearing and there's sex, and also this land that is kind of like Narnia. What I like most about this volume is there's a character that we see very little of in the first book, and we actually get to see what happened to her during the timeline of the first book, which I thought could have had its own separate book because it was very compelling. Unfortunately, Lev Grossman likes to use female characters as plot devices, so some terrible things happened to her, so there's that. But this book was full of adventure, and just when you thought you knew where it was going, it would turn on a dime. My last 3.5-star read was Summer of Salt by Katrina Leno. This is a vaguely witchy contemporary book that takes place somewhere on the east coast of the States. Our protagonist is a twin girl who has lived on the same island her entire life, and at the end of summer, her and her twin are going to go to different schools on the mainland. Something of note about her family is all of the women have powers, except for hers haven't shown up, and if they don't show up by the time she turns 18, she's probably not getting any. Their family hotel is famous because birders come from around the world to see this very specific bird that only shows up during the summer at their hotel, and this time it brings a potential romance for her. I enjoyed this. Some of the magical realism took me out of it a little bit, but overall, I did enjoy it. On to my 4-star reads. We've already talked about the first 2 volumes of I Hate Fairyland, and this is where they go in the list. This month I also read White Rose. Based on a true story, this is a novel told in verse about a college student who was actively trying to stand up to Hitler. The poems in this book went back and forth between after she was caught by the Gestapo and what she was doing behind the scenes to oppose the regime. And it simultaneously felt just long enough because I didn't really want to sit with what was happening in Germany at that time, and not long enough because I wanted to know more of her story. Next we have I Am Jay by Chris Beam. This is the story of Jay who realizes that they are trans. This story is the realization of who he is, how he transitions, and how he tries to tell the people around him who he is. There are trigger warnings for dead naming and parents and peers just not getting it, but this story is also filled with hope. Next we have Home and Away by Candace Montgomery. This is a story about Tasia, who one day finds her mom with this mysterious box which changes something about her identity. That's basically all I knew going in, and I don't want to wreck that for you. I want you to see that as yourself. Something I really enjoyed about this book is it really took the concept of home and away and played with it a lot. For example, Tasia is the only female football player at her school and I believe in her league, so obviously home games and away games, but also that box changes her identity in a way where she also plays with the concept of being home and being away. I picked up this book for Prideathon because it had a side creative by character, and we all know I'm here for that. Next we have my short story, which was 1408 by Stephen King. I read this for Half-a-Weenathon, which is currently happening. Although this ended up inspiring quite a good movie with John Cusack, this is actually only a 56-page short story, and I think it's possibly even better as the movie because it added some backstory to the character. That being said, I enjoyed it in both formats. The story is about Mike, who is a writer, which Stephen King writes so many writers because write what you know, obviously. He writes paperbacks about haunted places, so basically he goes, stays a night in a place, and then writes about it and puts them in compilations. And that's exactly what he's doing at the Dolphin Hotel, where he's going to stay in room 1408, which is supposed to be haunted. He doesn't really believe in this stuff, but he starts believing pretty soon. I also read In an Absent Dream by Shauna McGuire. This is the fourth in the Wayward Children series. I did not reread the first few books, so I forgot who Lundy was, but it also really doesn't matter with these books. You can kind of read them in whatever order and still really enjoy them because the world that is contained in them is so rich for such a short amount of pages. This one is about a girl who finds a passage into a goblin market, and what's interesting about her is someone else in her family has been there before. As always, after finishing this one, I'm just excited for the next one to come come out. This month I also listened to the BBC full cast recording of Good Omens, which was done as a radio play, and it was so much fun to listen to. I've read this book a couple of times before, and one of the best things about it is the dialogue, so having it in this format where it's basically all dialogue was just wonderful. There's actually a read-along later this month for this book because the TV series is coming out, and I am so excited for both the read-along and the TV series. My final 4-star read was my first read of the month, and that was The 7 Deaths of Evelyn Hardcastle. This book is a closed-room murder mystery, but there is a very big twist to it. Essentially, the protagonist wakes up one day, doesn't know who he is, but that somebody has been murdered. When he wakes up the next day, he's in a different host's body. He is given 8 days to solve this murder, and he will be allowed to leave. This book was very compelling. It had lots of twists, lots of turns, lots of timeline things that you need to pay very close attention to, and I feel like it's something that I could listen to a few more times and then maybe finally figure out the thread. A note on the title of this book that I find hilarious is in the UK it's The 7 Deaths, and in North America it's The 7.5 Deaths, because they specifically didn't want this one to be confused with The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, as though putting that half in there was really going to help people. But I read a Q&A with the author because I was trying to figure out why it had 2 different titles, and he said he wasn't very precious about the title. I just thought it was very strange that the publishers decided we needed a different title so that people wouldn't get confused. On to my 4.5-star reads, the first one being We Crossed the Bridge and It Trembled by Wendy Perlman. This is a series of interviews of people from Syria who are either still there or are in refugee camps or are living in other countries now. This book is broken up into different sections based on timeline, so it gives you an idea of what has been going on in that country over the past 50 years or so. And through these first-person accounts, it really humanizes what has been going on and the people that have fled. Obviously, there are some very dark and harsh topics in this one, but it is definitely worth a read. My other 4.5-star read was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. This is one I read as an audiobook, and I highly suggest that format if that's something that works for you. This book is written as a series of interviews, kind of VH1 style, but on the page. And I know for some people that visual style doesn't work, but it really works as an audiobook, and I think that Taylor Jenkins Reid must have written this to be an audiobook. This was a full cast narration, so every character had their own voice actor, and I felt that really got you into who everybody was as a person. This is written as a biography of the band The Six, as well as Daisy Jones, and how they eventually collaborate. I felt that this format was an incredibly interesting challenge to try to put together a story, and I really enjoyed how she managed to do that. On to my 5-star reads, 2 of which are rereads, so I always put those at the beginning of the 5-star reads and let things that are brand new in 5-star reads be at the end and the top of my list for the month. The first reread was All Are Wrong Todays by Elan Mastai, and this is another one that I highly suggest the audiobook if audiobooks are something that work for you, because it is read by the author and he does an amazing job. This is a time travel novel, and it is my favorite piece of time travel literature, including the Back to the Future trilogy, which was my favorite before I read this book. The protagonist starts out by telling us why other time travel media wouldn't work, and it was something so simple that I had never considered before. And then this story plays with timelines in such a fascinating way. The protagonist's father creates time travel as a tourism destination because he is from a very utopian 2016. And I'm sure it's not a spoiler to tell you that something goes horribly wrong. I adore this book, and I absolutely adore the narration. My other 5-star reread was In Other Lands by Sarah Rees Brennan, which I mentioned at the beginning of the video. This is a portal fantasy in which Elliot is one of the few people that can see this other land somewhere within Britain and goes off to defend the border. The thing is, though, he's a pacifist, so he is not going to be in the fighting side of things, he's going to be in the strategy side of things. He doesn't have a great home life, he's very, very snarky, and he is a disaster buy. I obviously absolutely adore this book, and my friend Adriana recently made a 5 reasons to read video about it, so I will be sure to link that down below as well, because they do an amazing job of explaining exactly why everyone needs to read this book. My penultimate 5-star read was To Night Owl from Dogfish. This is a book written back and forth in emails and text messages, primarily between Avery Bloom and Bette Devlin. Bette finds out that she is being sent to the same summer camp as Avery because both of their fathers are now in a relationship and they want them to get along. They live on opposite sides of America, and although Avery is the type that really wanted to go to this summer camp, neither of them is used to sharing their respective fathers, so they're not very into this this idea. The format of this book is really what sold it for me. These two girls meet over email and email back and forth and start to get to know each other even though they don't really want to get to know each other. And occasionally there are other email chains between them and their parents or school counselors or their grandmother or that type of thing, which makes listening to the book quite a treat because it is a full cast narration. However, if you listen to this book, there is something very annoying in the first third of it, which is that Avery and Bet are in the same email chain the whole time, and every time they reply to each other, another "re" is added to the subject line, which is so annoying to listen to. It's funny the first couple of times just being like, "Re, you don't know me. Re, you don't know me. Re, you don't know me." But when there's like 30 re's in there, it's very annoying to listen to. This book is about evolving friendship and mending relationships and relationships dissolving, and I really enjoyed it. It was very sweet. I highly suggest it. My favorite book I read this month, I actually read the first half of while I was at a drag show, and that is Going Off Script by Jen Wilde. Our 18-year-old protagonist has just shown up in Los Angeles to live with their cousin who is a makeup artist and to work as an intern on their favorite show. Bex also really wants to come out of the closet as soon as they arrive in Los Angeles, but there's this family history of her following in the footsteps of her cousin, and since her cousin is gay, she thinks that her family is going to think that she's saying she's gay just because her cousin is gay, and she's totally not. Something that I really love about this book that I didn't even go into detail when I talked about it in my weekly wrap-up is it is set in the same universe as Queens of Geek and The Brightsiders, which are Jen's previous books. So if you've read those books, you will see some of the characters from those books show up in this book. While Bex is interning, she writes a spec script for an episode that would add another queer character to her favorite show, and her boss ends up stealing it. Obviously, that situation is not ideal. This book talks about power and manipulation and fandom and wanting to see queer characters on television, and I stinkin' loved it. It comes out in 3 weeks. Please pick it up. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, or other books for that matter, the playlist for my weekly entertainment wrap-ups is always listed down below. If you've read any of these, please let me know about it down in the comments below. On the way down to the comments, if you hit that subscribe button, that would be very nice of you. You can like and share this as you see fit, and I will see you very soon. Bye!